Hey guys, coming into me another movie for you guys, and this movie reviewing, I have wanted to see this movie for so long. Not just because of the trailers, and not just this year, but in general, I've heard about this movie for many years, and I've really been looking forward to it, and that movie is Steve Jobs. I have been looking forward to Steve Jobs for a very long time now, mainly because of Jobs. I'll tell you why. I remember I heard of Jobs, and I thought what Jobs was is what this movie was. And when I was watching Jobs, I'm like, I'm very confused. I thought that was going to be what this movie was. And then I realized they were making two Steve Jobs movies, and I was much more interested in this one because this one seemed a lot more interesting. It seemed like it was going to have more of, it seemed like it was going to be a lot more divisive and a lot more unique, and just seemed it really interested me more than the Ashton Kutcher one did. Now, I never finished the Ashton Kutcher Steve Jobs movie from 2013. I probably never will because I'm just not very interested in that one. However, this is the one that really interested me. It was getting rave reviews. I mean, the trailers were coming out. I was really wanting to watch this film, and I am so happy I was finally able to watch Steve Jobs because Steve Jobs is one of the best movies of the year, without a doubt. I loved every minute about this movie. It is a masterpiece in my opinion, and it's not a biopic. It's kind of more of a father-daughter story, which I'll talk about, and that's something I definitely really enjoyed. Now, the plot of Steve Jobs is one of the most interesting things about the movie. It's not just one plot. It's really one big plot condensed over a bunch of years, and I definitely really love that. It takes place there's three different acts of this movie. I like to kind of think of it as a play. You know, when you see a play and there's act one, act two, that's kind of how I saw this movie. I saw it as a three-act play, and that's very much how it is. We basically focus on Steve Jobs and his success with creating the computer. You know, he's trying to create a computer. The first half depicts him trying to create the Apple Macintosh in 1984. The second half has, after the Macintosh fails, he tries to create the next computer. He tries to do that, which is literally, it's called the next computer. I'm not kidding you. And then in 1998, he tries to make the iMac, all wrapped around this father-daughter story that I will get into, and basically it also deals with the difficulties he had making these computers, and that basically is a plot of Steve Jobs, and I really love seeing, also, it's the way they did also is it's right before he's about to give his speech about what the computer is going to be and announce it, and that basically is a plot of Steve Jobs. And I found this to be very interesting, and there are a lot of things that really work in this movie. Without a doubt, though, the thing that totally anchors this film, the thing that would totally fail, is the acting. I mean, if the acting would not have been amazing, the acting would have totally failed, and I really think everyone did an incredible job in this movie, and everyone really gave it their all. The best, without a doubt, though, is Michael Fassbender as Steve Jobs. I was iffy, honestly, guys. I was a bit iffy of Michael Fassbender, mainly just because I don't know if I really saw him as Steve Jobs. When they cast him, I'm like, I don't know. Michael Fassbender, I don't really know if that's going to work. I don't remember who was originally supposed to play him. There were other people that were supposed to play him. Um, who was it? Leonardo DiCaprio was actually originally supposed to play him. And I remember I was disappointed when he didn't get to play him because he would have been really great. Then Christian Bale was going to play him. That didn't happen. And then when they announced Michael Fassbender, I remember I was a bit worried. But he had this character down perfectly. I mean, it took me, right from the trailers, I knew he was going to be incredible. And he definitely really got lost in this role as Steve Jobs. I really believe that he was Steve Jobs. And the thing about Steve Jobs in general is that he's not really a great person. In fact, he's kind of a dick. He really is. He is very much into himself. He is obsessed with fame. He's obsessed. He's in love with this technology, and he's really not a great man. But there's a lot that's happened with Steve Jobs, and they really showed all that very well. And I think he just had the character done so well. He was very witty and funny at points, because Steve Jobs was witty and funny, but he also had some great standout dramatic scenes, and it was great to watch him freak out when these computers were coming out. Just his passion for computers in general, I definitely really love. I think he did an incredible job, and definitely, in my opinion, deserves to win Best Actor. I really think he deserves to win, honestly. I think he's going to get nominated, and he's probably going to win. I would not be surprised if he wins, because I really feel he deserves to win for his portrayal as Steve Jobs. He gave an incredible portrayal. His performance was fantastic, and I loved everything that he did in this role. Kate Winslet as Joanna, I really liked her in this movie. She is the marketing executive and basically the person that basically keeps Steve Jobs sane. Like, she always gives him advice, and I really like the scenes between the two of them. She was very much like his conscience at points. Like, she's telling him, oh, no, 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 you don't want to do this. Don't freak out. It's all going to be okay. And I definitely like seeing this. And she was also kind of like a motherly figure towards him because Steve Jobs was actually adopted, we find out in this movie. And I very much like that with her. She did a very good job. I like the chemistry between these two, and they both were really great. Seth Rogen, holy shit, Seth Rogen in this movie. I mean, I knew Seth Rogen could act, but in my opinion, this is probably Seth Rogen's best performance that he's ever given as Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak, I believe, is Steve Jobs' best friend. I believe that's what he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be his best friend. But Steve Wozniak knows that things aren't really going well for Steve Jobs, and he tries to give him advice, and a lot of the advice he gives him, it just doesn't really work. There are some great, really intense scenes between them. I really think he did a great job. And definitely, I think Seth Rogen should be nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He definitely deserves it, as should Jeff Daniels. Oh my god, John Scully in this movie is just so, so great. You understand everything that John Scully is saying. And what I love about Steve Wozniak and John Scully is that all they're doing is giving Steve Jobs constructive criticism. They're not being rude. They're just saying, hey, this might not work out the way you want it to, or hey, maybe we should try this product. But Steve Jobs is so confident that his products are going to work that he does not want to listen to them. And I found that to be very, very interesting, and I really loved both of their characters. The back and forth between them. There is this one extremely intense scene in Act 2 when he's trying to sell the next computer. Oh my god, one of the most intense things I have seen all year. Just incredible stuff. I love Jeff Daniels in this movie. He did an incredible job and really was fantastic. I also really love Catherine Waterston in this movie as Chrison Brennan, who is a former girlfriend, and in the very beginning of this movie, basically sets one of the biggest plot points of the movie, which is that she tells Steve Jobs that he has a daughter that he didn't know about, and I really love what they did with her character. Most of this movie, he's treating her like shit. I mean, he's not letting her have any money. He's kind of just shutting her out of his life. He doesn't want anything to do with her. However, the mood, their relationship overall does change throughout the film, and I definitely really did like that. And I really think she did a really great job. Nothing Oscar-worthy, but definitely she was really great in the movie, and I definitely really loved her portrayal here. I also really like Michael Stolberg in this movie. He was really good. However, who I really want to talk about that I don't think a lot of people have talked about, just because I really feel they do need recognition, are all three of the actresses that played Lisa. Steve Jobs' daughter. Perla Haney Jardine played Lisa at 5. Ripley Sobo played her at 9, and then Mackenzie Moss played her at 19. They all did an incredible job. They all were fantastic, and I thought all three of them really got into this role. I mean, you really see this is a very difficult relationship for Steve Jobs because he basically has to love something that's not himself and that's not one of his products, and it's very interesting to watch because, like I said, Steve Jobs doesn't really necessarily know how to love, and he doesn't really know how to deal with this child. He doesn't even think this daughter is his, and the relationship between these two is just one of the most fascinating relationships I've seen all year. I really loved it. All three of these actresses really understood the character very, very well, and they all really do have a bright future. I thought all three of them were great, and they all did a great job. And something else I liked is that I didn't really feel like they were changing the actress. I mean, when they changed her from 5 to 9, I'm like, that looks like the same actress. They did that very, very well, and I definitely think they did a very good job with that. Everyone was fantastic in this movie. Everyone really did a great job, and that was definitely the thing that anchored this movie so, so well. Now, another thing that most people are looking forward to is the directing here by Danny Boyle. Danny Boyle did a great job directing this movie. What I love about his tone to this film is that he was very restrained. I heard a lot of Danny Boyle's films are very, big, and this movie is, but it's also a very restrained film. This is not a film that has any action sequences. It's a dialogue-driven film, and he really portrayed that very, very well. I also like that he he didn't really make this a biopic. What I will say is that I do kind of feel it's a biopic because they told you everything you need to know about Steve Jobs very, very quickly. Like, this is a movie where they give you a lot of information, but they only gave you really what you need to know, and I really appreciate that because it showed more of the character of Steve Jobs. It showed more of why he was the way he was, and I definitely really appreciate that. Um, the directing here, though, was really, really good. He really had a very good tone throughout this film, and I like the style of this film as well. Probably one of my favorite styles of the year. The editing style definitely was very interesting here, but I thought his directing was really great. However, without a doubt, probably maybe my favorite screenplay of the year from Aaron Sorkin. He just did a great job with this screenplay. I love this screenplay. I really do. I mean, there was not a single moment in this movie that took me out of it. I was into this movie the entire time. I found everything to be so interesting. Just every conversation brought up, I really, really loved, especially the conversations that Seth Rogen and Jeff Daniels' characters bring up when they talk about how Steve Jobs is not necessarily a genius. It's a very interesting subject that came up, and they really handled all that very, very well, and I really appreciate that. And seeing Steve Jobs freak out about these computers that he thinks are going to change the world and he thinks are going to be legendary are very interesting to watch. One of my favorite parts of this movie is we all know the Apple Macintosh commercial in 1984, the one where it's supposed to be from the book 1984. They really went into that very, very well. They show like the idea he had behind that, and I like that they actually showed that because I always wondered, how the hell did he come up with that? How the hell did Steve Jobs come up with that? And also, I did not know any of this story. I didn't know that the Apple Macintosh failed. I didn't know the next computer failed. I mean, obviously, yeah, we don't have a next computer. I'm recording off a MacBook right now, so yeah, obviously that's not a next computer, it's a MacBook, so there is that. But I really didn't know the story. I didn't know how much Steve Jobs struggled in his life, and I really like seeing that. In fact, I thought this movie was going to be the Mac, the iPod, and the iPad, and I definitely like the way they did that. I like that it was more of telling a story that we didn't know, doing something that was a bit different. Because, I thought it was going to be about creating the iPod, creating the iPhone. I don't believe he was alive for the iPad. I don't remember exactly the year that Steve Jobs died. I believe it was 2009. Don't quote me on that. I think it was something like that. I don't really remember, but all I know is that he wasn't alive to make like the iPhone. I know he didn't make like the iPad, I'm pretty sure. I think he made the first iPhone. I'm not really sure though. But it was a very interesting story they told. I definitely really like seeing that, and I like that they didn't make Steve Jobs a complete dick. They showed that he does have a heart. He does want to make things better. There's a reason why he just is the way he is, and I really like that about his character. He has a big ego, and a lot of times that ego really does come out, and they did a very good job with showing that. But what I also really love the most is the relationship between him and his daughter. Surprisingly, this is really the thing that anchored the film. I mean, it really is about him and his daughter throughout this entire movie, and it was a very sweet story. It really was. I mean, just showing how his daughter wanted to be in his life. She didn't not want to be in his life. She wanted to be in his life, and he just really didn't know what to do with her. It was a very sweet story. They told in the very honest way, and I definitely really appreciate that. That's something I thought was very well done. And the ending scene between them, I was almost in tears, guys, honestly. The last scene that these two have in this movie, I was almost in tears. I really was. I thought it was a beautiful scene. One of the best endings I've seen all year by far. Just fantastic. I loved it. The movie is also quite funny. I mean, some of the things that are said are very funny. I mean, the first half of this movie, Steve Jobs is upset because the computer just won't say hello. It's actually pretty funny. I definitely really like the way they did that. I also liked how with Trumbo, how I said with Trumbo they do a lot of newsreels? Well, this did it a bit differently. What they did with this that I really enjoyed were the flashbacks. Because there's so much time passed throughout this movie, what they do is they'll have little conversations where someone will say something that happened a few years ago and flash back just to see what this character's success has been since we last left them off. And I thought they did that very, very well. A lot of times in movies, time jumps don't exactly work. This is a movie where it worked perfectly. It felt like it was a long, when years had passed, it felt like years had passed. When When characters have lost, it felt like they have actually lost. You feel like you've spent all this time with them. And I definitely really love the way they handled it. A lot of movies nowadays don't really know how to do that, and they did that very, very well here. And I really love that. The screenplay overall was just so great. The dialogue was so interesting. It was so amazing, and I really hope that Aaron Sorkin gets nominated for Best Screenplay. Definitely deserves to get nominated. Without a doubt, my favorite screenplay of the year. I absolutely loved this screenplay, and it completely anchored the entire film. And I will say to you guys, though, this is not, if you guys don't want to see a movie that's just complete dialogue and all these conversations that are elevating the tension and adding to the story and doing something, just telling a story, that's really all they're doing. They're not, a lot of people say, oh, not a lot happened in this movie. There are freakouts in this movie. There are a lot of, deep conversations in this movie, but there aren't any, like, action scenes in this movie. There's none of that. And if you don't want to see a movie like that, you're probably not going to like this movie very much. I'm just going to tell you that, because a lot of this movie is conversation, and I really did appreciate that, and I really did like that. And they really went all out in terms of the cinematography. One of my favorite styles of the year was the cinematography. If you guys don't know, all three acts of this film were filmed in different ways. The first was shot in 16 millimeter. The second, I believe, was shot in um regular 90 millimeter, something like that. I don't remember, but the last was digital, the way movies are shot today. It really just showed, like Steve Jobs, how much our technology is changing, and how the evolution of technology, how it's changing, how it's developing. And that's something they did very, very well, was do it in a very subtle way. And I really like that a lot of this movie, it's some very subtle things. And the cinematography overall looked great. I mean, when he goes out to do those press conferences, it feels big. It really does feel like something big, and I really did appreciate that. Just seeing the crowd get so into it for this man who's not even that much of a genius. I mean, just finding out that Steve Jobs is not necessarily the man we thought he was. I really like the way they did that, because you have this crowd who pretty much just thinks he's this greatest, the greatest guy ever, but then you realize that he might not necessarily have been involved with this specific product, and I really like finding that out. They did that very, very well, and I really like seeing that. This movie was not at all one-sided. That's something they did really well. They really got the opinion of everyone. You really got to see how everyone contributed to these products that he was making. And even though he didn't, he wanted to take all the credits, he wouldn't admit that they had some influence into these products. He wanted to take all the credits, and that's something I thought was very well done. I definitely really appreciate the way that they did that. A lot of movies are afraid to do that nowadays, and this movie really did that in a very unapologetic way, and I really did appreciate that. The score of this movie was great. I really did love it. Also, I loved the way the time periods were done in the movie. I like the way characters' hairstyles changed. They did that very well. And by the end of this movie, Michael Fassbender definitely looked like Steve Jobs. You might not have looked at him at the beginning, but definitely at the end, he definitely looked like Steve Jobs. I really felt like this was Steve Jobs, and they did that very, very well. I was a bit worried that he wasn't actually going to look like him, but he looked like him very, very well, and I really believed he was Steve Jobs, definitely. The makeup was good, the costumes were good, just everything in cinematography was great. The score was fantastic. I really did love the score of this movie. And the editing style. Oh my god, I love the editing style to this movie. I love the decision that they make to show just these three events. We don't need a biopic on Steve Jobs. In many ways, this is, like I said, because they're giving us important information that we needed, but they did it in a very subtle way, and this was a much interesting story than would have been Steve Jobs from Life to Death. One of the reasons Jobs didn't work out is because it really was not that interesting of a story. It was Jobs at college it was Steve Jobs before he was successful. That's not necessarily an interesting story. We've seen that, zero to hero story a million times. This is something we haven't seen before. We haven't really seen someone who's made something and it's completely failed and things like that. That's something that we haven't exactly seen, and that's a really great idea that they did, and I'd love to see more movies done this way. This was a very cool idea, and it really worked out very, very well, and I definitely really appreciated the way they did that. I wasn't necessarily sure if it was going to work, but it really did work, and each one, the movie really gets more and more interesting as it goes on. I was worried that, the the first act of the movie was so strong that I was worried when we were jumping forward. I was like, okay, I'm worried this isn't going to be as strong. And then it was stronger. And then the third one was even stronger. All three acts all together just make one amazing movie, and they all did it so, so well. And I absolutely love that. Overall, guys, Steve Jobs is an amazing movie. I would definitely recommend you guys check it out. If you want to see an unapologetic story about Steve Jobs and show the way he was portrayed and things like that, but also a very heartwarming story about a father and daughter just trying to connect, which I definitely really appreciated. If you really strip it down, that's a lot of what this movie is, and I thought they did that very, very well. This movie is definitely going to get a lot of Oscars potential. You're definitely going to hear about towards the Oscars, and I definitely liked hearing about that. And I am definitely going to give Steve Jobs a 5 out of 5 or an A+. You betcha it will be in my top 10 for the rest of for the whole year. It will definitely be there. I loved every minute of this movie. I can't wait to watch it again. Honestly, when I was done with it, I couldn't wait to watch it again. Also, the movie went by so fast for me. The movie's 2 hours long. It flew by like that. I mean, it really is an extremely engrossing film. If you really get into this story, you will definitely, I'll say this, if the movie doesn't hook you by when his daughter's introduced, you won't like this movie as much. I was hooked from the start, but if the movie doesn't hook you from when his daughter's introduced, you won't be as into it. But I was completely into it. I was loving every minute of it, and I would definitely recommend Steve Jobs. It truly is a masterpiece, and it is definitely one of the best movies you will see all year long. But that is my review of Steve Jobs. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you guys saw this movie, have seen it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for another movie review, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.